PGA Nation, we are back. The Farmers Insurance Open. We're heading out to Cali this week. Still getting a couple courses. Not going to get one. Going to have a couple, but much better. Only 2 courses this week. 3 rounds on the same course. Much more manageable week for breaking it down. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. A pretty loaded field. I think it's going to be an exciting week in terms of DFS. Spence, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Joel. It's exciting to do this show with you this week. It will be easier to break down these courses than we had last week. I cannot say, though, it's easier to produce content with this starting on a Wednesday. It's been a very jam-packed week from Monday to Tuesday here of trying to fit in. I mean, essentially, it's 3 days worth of content for me. That even is a very tough fit to fit it into that many days. Trying to get it all in, but it's always nice to have golf to talk about.
So you're 100% right. Definitely much harder on content starting on Wednesday. But other than that, which is like selfish of us, mainly you because you do a lot more of it, I actually like it better. I mean, generally, just in the terms of the week of golf starting on Wednesday, I think the more golf avoids football, the better. We could let those two things be separate. I like getting in the action a little bit earlier in the week. So I like the Wednesday start other than the challenges it has with making content.
Yeah.
But without further ado, before we move on, we must congratulate you, Spence. A great draft last week and a W. What do you have to say? What do you have to thank for your great picks?
I was looking at that lineup as the day was going on, and I always just run when I track it back into the system with the $5 contest that's out there that gets 40 to 50,000. I was checking my score in that contest throughout the entire duration of it. And like that lineup was inside the top 500 for the whole time of it. I think it ended up finishing in like 219th place or something, but very solid lineup. I mean, like it's amazing in that tournament what happens when all of a sudden an amateur ends up winning the golf tournament that's like 0% owned with the totals there. But I don't know. I mean, it was, I don't know if you saw this, Joel. Nick, my partner, Sticks Picks from Better Golf, he had a lineup that was buzzing on Sunday. He had Dunlap, he had Burns, he had JT, and he had Patrick Cantlay. And the Burns double finish, and then the Cantlay implosion that he had himself on the day. I think he ended up coming in 6th place, he said, but that lineup had a big potential to take down the entire contest.
He had Dunlap?
Yeah.
I'm amazed. That's amazing. Amazing. So, yeah, I mean, listen, you're right in the thick of things. You got to ride that heater. You got to play them while you're hot. You're close. I'm impressed. David, how'd you do last week?
Yeah, good to see you boys again. I will add with Sticks Picks, who's also over at Window Sports. He had one lineup with Dunlap. It just happened to have all the other guys that you kind of needed with it. So sometimes, those plays end up coming off, and that's why when you're entering those 150 max kind of tournaments, getting a little bit different here and there can really pay off in a huge way. I think he was pretty unlucky that Cantlay kind of blew it for him at the last moment, because that was really the one piece of the jigsaw puzzle that cost him many 5-figure amounts of money there. Overall for me, like probably another great week, but another frustrating week. Sam Burns was our top pick. I took him first in the draft. He, again, probably should have won that tournament. And it's kind of the 3rd week in the PGA Tour that we've had these guys who really probably should have won the tournament go and get beat by 200 to 1 outsiders. First week we had Thigala, Jordan Spieth, Sungjae Im all in the top 10 and all just should have won. Sony Open, we had Russell Henley, and then this week we had Sam Burns. So a little bit frustrating, but also just a lot of trust in the process that we're finding the guys who are constantly in contention. You know what? Sometimes the 200 to 1, 300 to 1 amateur is going to come out and win a golf tournament, but we're finding the guys who are right there at the top. So some really promising signs.
And it goes to show you, a lot of being profitable and doing well in this is not just, how many winners you pick, right? It's like, how do you make the right bets? Like if you're picking the right guys and they're doing well consistently, you're not just betting winners, but you're betting top 5, top 10, top 20, you'll get your wins, right? Your justice is due. It's going to come through for you. So think about that. Don't always shoot for them. Like it's always fun to go hunting for the big prize, but it's also about consistently winning and getting out there. So you got to play it smart some weeks. The Dunlap story was awesome. It was cool to see him win. I am impressed that Sticks had him in his lineup. Will there be another Dunlap this week? My theory is kind of thinking about this. There's not going to be an amateur that wins 20 tournaments this year, right? That's just not how it's going to happen. So it happens every year. There's a handful of wins. There'll probably be another one this year, maybe 2 more. That'll probably be the extent of it. So the way I look at it is that we got 1 out, and there'll probably be a couple more throughout the year. But the more and more the year goes on, especially as we get to the tougher tournaments, the more the cream rises. So I think we get a big name winner this week. And I'm looking forward to seeing which guys you guys are tailing and who you're looking at. Before we dive into the draft, Spence, how are you breaking down the courses this week?
So players are going to rotate, and I'm not going to spend too long doing this. If you've listened to content and, depending on, it's 9:00 on the East right now, like lineups are going to lock in, less than 12 hours, give or take here. So I don't want to give too much of that there's 2 courses. There's the North and the South. Golfers are going to split those between the first 2 days. I do think there's an interesting concept that comes into play here, though, between the South and the North. So it's been a lot of rain in the area over the past handful of days. I think when you look at that 7,700 yard South course, it's going to make it play even longer than you would have expected it to play. The rough is supposedly very gnarly out there. For me, though, when I ran my model, one of the things I noticed just over and over again is that despite the North only holding 25% of the rounds, we did get the most impactful 18 holes played there when it came to deciding the winner. So most iterations of this contest have been won, we'll say somewhere between 13 and 15 under. I think you could make an argument here that if it plays more difficult, that it might even be less than that. But when you dive into the fact that the last 5 winners of this tournament have shot between 4 to 9 under during their one-off chance at the more straightforward and less than 400 yards shorter North property, I thought it began to highlight the need to get off to a very quick start when scoring was possible. 7 holes at the North have over a 20% birdie or better percentage. That includes 4 par 5 setups that produce significant eagle rates compared to the South counterpart that they have there. It's going to be better tree lined. You're going to have slower bent grass surface versus its South counterpart on POA. You're going to get more short to mid irons in over that redundant ask of the South from outside of 200. I overweighed my model on the North property for that reason. I know there's only 25% there. I weighted as if it was 35% of the weight. So 10% extra of what it was supposed to be, 65% at the South. I think it's a way to get unique and different in my builds because we give this answer every single week on this show, and just so happens to be the nature of the game. Well, I think the general public is so much more intelligent than they've ever been before. You still get all the condensed ownership in certain ranges, and it comes down to concept selection at the end of the day. If you're in a mass field type of entries that you're building, you're going to have to find the Nick Dunlaps into the mix. So it's always what I'm trying to do with my model when I build it. And I think there are a couple interesting names down there this week.
Well, there you go. I'm excited to see who you're looking at. Hopefully, I hope I get to steal some of your picks. That always makes me feel good. Even if I don't win, as long as I got your picks, I'm feeling good about it. But without further ado, we will pull up the draft and we'll get into this draft. For those of you that are new, the way it works is like a standard fantasy football draft. It's snake style. Since Spencer won last week, he got to pick the order, and he's going to go ahead and pick first. David, go ahead and pull the board up. I don't have it this week. I'm going to go second, David third, audience fourth. It works in the stake style, so audience, you'll go twice. If you are new to the show, of course, you do have to stay in salary. You cannot just pick all the best golfers. You do need to make sure you stay within a DraftKings salary. So, without further ado, Spence, you're on the clock with the first pick.
I don't think I needed to have the number 1 pick to do this. It's one of those things, Joel, where if I win, I just give myself the number 1 pick just for the sake of having it. I'm sure I could have been later. I probably could have still gotten this guy maybe past the first round. Not that he's going to not be popular, but it's a golfer that I seem to have taken every single tournament, what feels like for 3 months here. And every single week I get let down from the putter, and it just consistently keeps happening. But I'm going to play it one more time here at the Farmers, a tournament that I have always said he will win at some point in his career before everything is said and done. Doesn't have that victory yet. He does have a handful of top 15 finishes when you dive into everything. Second in my model in expected weighted tee to green for these courses. I'm going to take Tony Finau at 9,300. I'm going to try to build a lineup that starts with him. There's a lot of popularity in the $10,000 section. I think that's fine, but I'm going to go with Finau for a little bit cheaper and a little bit less ownership.
I like Finau right now. I like the way he's playing. I like Finau in California. I'm definitely behind that pick. What say you, David?
Yeah, definitely like Finau. He's on my radar this week. I think one thing is a lot of people just seem to be really out on Finau, just given the fact that he's constantly finding himself in contention and not getting across the line. What I would point out is that some of the greens, the putting here, particularly on the POA, on the South course, is really, really difficult. And so a lot of people are going to struggle with that coming down the stretch, especially over the weekend. And I'd also point out that Tony Finau has gained pretty well on putting on this course historically. So he's got a good record putting here. If you can put his ball striking along with that and his strong driving ability, I think he's a really good selection. Seeing some pretty low ownership as well on him compared to others around that mark.
I love it. There you have it. Before I make my pick, I assume, we're all a bunch of golf addicts. We all do the same things before the week. I'm sure a lot of you have used the website Fantasy National to kind of make models and look at different statistics. I assume that the update happened to everybody this week. I logged into Fantasy National this week, completely changed. Everything looks different. Don't know how to find what I want to find. I was absolutely baffled. I'm sitting here scrambling, trying to make a new model for this tournament. I got it done at the last minute. I'm still uncomfortable with the new look. I actually think it could be fine in the future, but I'm still not comfortable with how it looks. So that threw me. So we'll see how this goes because I have to kind of find my data a little bit differently. But with that being said, I'm hesitating on my pick because I don't feel like I need to take him here. He is who I want first. I just don't feel like he would have gone in the first round, so I probably could save him. But I'm going to take him anyway. I'm not going to leave it to chance. I think he's just a really good course fit. His start of the year is probably maybe a little bit more disappointing than people were hoping, but I think this guy is the future. He's going to have a great year. I'm going to go ahead and take Ludwig.
Oh my God. All right, Joel, you've already taken my pick, so congratulations.
Success. No matter what happens from here on out, it was a successful pick on my end. We already know, Spence, how you feel. David, is Ludwig on your radar this week?
I question where his game's at this year. I wonder if there's a bit of a more like sophomore kind of slump with Aberg potentially coming. I mean, we kind of saw it with Tom Kim, right? Like Tom Kim came out the gates like so hot and everyone was just on the Tom Kim train, riding that into the future. And then he really struggled the next year with that kind of weight of expectation. And I kind of wonder if that's maybe going to happen a little bit with Aubert. I think he's a more talented golfer than Tom Kim potentially, just potentially with the driver that's really going to hold him in good stead. Obviously, this is a very driver-heavy course, so that on surface seems like it's going to suit. Yeah, I do wonder just a little bit whether there's a lot of expectation on his shoulders. Not just from the public, but himself as well, and how he adjusts to that.
We'll see. I mean, you're right. I mean, I'm leaning on. I think it is a really good course fit. To your point, it's the long hitter, it's the driver. I think that this looks good, and he's still under 10K. So I wouldn't say this. I think he's priced fairly, but I'm happy with that price. I will add. I think maybe the concerning part about picking Ludwig is a lot of those success he had at the end of last year, where he was really hot and he couldn't get those great finishes, were weaker fields, right? And he was beating a little worse competition. And this is probably a stronger field than when we kept seeing those great results. So we'll see if he can translate some of those great results to a stronger field. But if there's a week he can do it, I do think it's this one. All right, David, you're up. Oh, go ahead, Spence.
Just very quickly on that. I mean, the only concern I have is that it's his first time, really, if you look at the data of him on POA. This has been a course that historically there is some rollover predictability to it. This is a tailor-made venue for him. Like, I don't want to discredit him from things that we don't know. I think he's a pristine talent. And to touch on the Fantasy National answer, I'm not 100% sure what the shift was about, but I do know from a personal perspective, and it was kind of one of the things just causing problems throughout the entire space. They had issues. The PGA Tour with their data that they're giving to everybody is a bit of a disaster right now, which is like, it caused my model to go down. It looks like it caused some of their stuff to go down. Data Golf seems like they've had some problems with it. Don't really know what's going on there. I don't know if that explains the stylistic change that Fantasy National had this week, but just at least something worth noting.
Interesting. I didn't think of that. You think it's more, it was like a force than it was a purposeful stylistic change, which could be. I don't know. But that's interesting. All right, David, first pick, third overall. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, so I'm going to take Sungjae Im here. I think Sungjae's just quietly been turning his game around in a really good way. I really like the all-round profile that you get with Sungjae. He's very strong with the driver, which is important around here, but he's also got a really, really sharp short game, one of the best in the business, both in putting and around the green. You've got these smaller than average greens here, as well as the length to contend with, and there is going to be a modicum of scrambling. I like Sungjae on those tougher tests as well. Like winning score here typically is between like 10 to 15 under, so you do need to take that into account with your selections. He's got a great record on the course. His last 2 starts here, he's finished 6th and 4th, and he's 8th last year at Quail Hollow as well, and I think Quail Hollow is a good comp to look at and keep on your radar this week.
There you have it, Sungjae. I love Sungjae. I took him last week. I think he's playing great. He will be in my player pool this week. What say you, Spence, on Sungjae?
Yeah, after you took Obear, I was gonna go Sungjae next. So I actually think, like, regardless of whatever the ownership is at this point, the Finau one would be a little bit probably more outside of the box than the other two. But I think that the value that you guys have gotten is really good in the first round. They wouldn't have lasted long, I can promise you that.
There you have it. And you never know with the draft cast. You know, some weeks the most popular guys don't get drafted. Some weeks they go first. So you always got to be on your toes. Audience, you're on the clock. Great job getting. I think both picks are in. I have not confirmed which one the second one is, but Homa's looked like he's locked in as the first pick. Homa was definitely someone I was considering there with my first pick. I went with Ludwig, but I could have taken Homa. I love that pick here. I think he's in a good spot to compete this week. Can you guys tell, looking through the chat, who is the second confirmed pick for the audience? Is it Minwoo?
Yeah, Minwoo it looks like, which is a real shame because he would have been my next pick as well.
There you have it. So we're all aligned. All the picks so far, I think everyone's on board with. Everyone is going to be in everyone's players pool. I think this is a great start for the audience. I also think it's interesting that we all kind of started off in the same range, which is going to keep us in the same range as the draft goes on. So things are going to continue to get interesting. What say you, Spencer? You want Homa and Minwoo?
I think pricing is very stout across the board from DraftKings this week. I don't really have too many glaring issues where anybody's priced for the most part. I think, Minwoo's only downside that he has is the iron play. If you remove that from the mix, like, he's going to grade inside the top 5-year model. A lot of sharp movement hit him early in the week. Homa was the number 1 player for me in projected upside for this event. So I like the start from the audience.
I love it as well. David, we heard your take on Minwoo. Is Homa on your player pool this week as well?
I think I'm probably out on Homer just because of the ownership. He's going to get really pretty well steamed here, right? I mean, and that is because he's got a great record, and I understand that. I just think that in that sort of circumstance, is Homer the guy that I really want to be trusting here, or do I want to be looking at some of the other options around him? And I probably favor the latter myself.
To David's point, you do need to take some stances, right? There's got to be some popular guys that you fade, and you got to be right on those to be, especially this week. There's a lot of playable guys up in this range, so I can totally understand it. I'll be playing Homa, but I get your point. All right, David, your second pick here. Who are you looking at to follow up Sungjae?
Yeah, well, I've been left scrambling a little bit by the audience because, as I said, I would have taken Minwoo Lee there. I just love the driving stats that we're getting from Minwoo at the moment. And again, it's that combination of really good short game, great putter, great around the green, and a long driver as well, which is really necessary here. So well done to the audience for getting me on that one. I'm going to go down the board a little bit and grab some value. I really like Adam Schenk this week. He ranks really well. I mean, he's 58th in the world on data golf, and you're just getting him for such a cheap price in terms of the salary for that kind of ranking of golfer. Of course, he was everyone's favorite towards the end of last year, but he seems to have really fallen off a lot of people's radar, and he still looks to be playing some really good golf. 20th here last time as well. So he's had some decent experience and he's gained putting here a lot, which I think is really important. He's also got a 13th at Quail Hollow on his second look there. So he ranks out really well. I'm not putting too much into the fact he missed the cut last week at the American Express. Like, that's a really weird kind of tournament with the formatting, the fact that the cut comes after 54 holes and it's such a low scoring birdie fest, kind of polar opposite to what you think this week. So some people end up getting off him because he missed the cut last week. I'm quite happy to take him here.
There you have it. Adam Schenk, and I know he's a favorite of yours. You take Adam Schenk a lot, and he's good. He's a great value, so I can certainly understand it. How about you, Spencer? You playing Adam Schenk at all this week?
I'm indifferent. I was asked that exact question earlier on a podcast, and I gave a very similar answer. Like, I think that the ownership is going to be greatly reduced because of him burning everybody last week. So from a contrarian sense, it makes the total sense of why David is going back in that direction. I just don't know if, when comparing him to some of the counterparts in that section, in that general like $7,300 range, there's a lot of names that I really like, and he kind of keeps getting pushed a little bit lower for me compared to them. But as I said, a very indifferent thing. Like, he's top 40 to 50, no matter how I build my model.
All right, there you have it. I'm hoping I'm going to go 2 for 2 on you, Spence, with 2 stolen picks. I am going back in that range with the value play. The only thing about this guy that I don't love this week is he is going to be pretty high owned. So I'm going to eat that ownership here. I think this is a really good course fit at a value price. I'm going to take Luke List at 7,800. I think the course fit, the distance, I think his form is good. At under 8K, Luke List is one of my favorite plays. Spencer, you want Luke List this week?
I think he's a great cash game play. I think he's great for single entry and 3 max sort of builds. I worry a little bit in some of the larger field contests. He's been phenomenal at this course, and that's something that that shows in the data. It shows with the victory that he has here. Before, he's probably a better golfer now than even when he won that event, but he's going to be very popular. That's my only concern, but he's too cheap. I wish, very similar answer that I always give on the show, I wish they would have made him 8,800, but the problem with that is, even if you looked at tournaments when he was in worse fields than this, he was about this price tag. So, the market, for whatever reason, or DraftKings, if we want to specifically put it on them, just haven't loved him for whatever reason. And my model's been very consistent with that answer. Like, he's been a fade for me even when he was burning me week after week. My model loved him this week. He was a top 15 safety option in the field for me. I think he's too cheap. I just worry about that ownership.
It's interesting. Our old friend, our good friend, Sia Najad, who's not on tonight, he'll be back soon. If you've listened to our show for a long time, you've heard Sia say this. Sia has a theory that guys who have boring names tend to get under-owned because they're just boring and people just overlook them, and you play the boring name and that can be an advantage. I feel like Luke List is the opposite. He's kind of like a fun name. He's like Luke List, like people like it, and then it gets over-owned because they're like, hey, let's play Luke List. He's like the fun, cool sounding guy. So I'm taking Sia's theory on that, and it's probably come to fruition, especially for the right reasons. Obviously, the reasons I took him, the ownership will be high. But to your point, Spence, I totally agree. I think he's a good course fit. He is probably better suited for smaller fields, but I think you get a good result out of him this week. David, are you playing Luke List at all this week?
I really hate to talk down both of your first picks, Joel, but I'm fully out on Luke List this week. I think the ownership's too high. I'm always in favor of fading the 7K chalk if I can. And for me, yes, he's got a really good record here. I can't dispute that. The fact that putting here ranks really highly for me. I know he's putted well here before, but we know that's the weakest aspect for Luke List. And yes, he could come out and play really well, but I'd rather take the chance that the really poor putter shows up and fade the chalk and try and get different in the 7K. That's just my take. I completely appreciate all your points and where you're coming from on it, but I'm a big fade on Luke List personally this week.
Can I ask you a follow-up question to that, David? Is that for primarily GPP contests? Would you play him in cash?
I would rather go the other way. I'd rather play him in GPP than in cash. If I'm looking for safety.
And just go massively overweight if you're going to play him and play him at like 60, 70%.
I don't think he'll be that highly owned.
I'm saying if you have to at some point, if you're going to, my theory is if you're going to play Luke List, you have to play him so above the field average to make it worth it. Like, If you're telling me you're going to play Luke List, I would rather play him at 70%. So you just say, I have the ownership hold on Luke List this week. I'm going to build lineups around him because I like him so much, and go in with that mentality that I'm just so over the field. Like, that's how I would rather get my exposure in GPPs. I'm not going to do that, but I actually think he's a good play for cash. That's just where I keep going back to on that.
I don't think you have to go as high as 70, right? Like if he's like 10 to 12% owned, even if you're at like 25, 30%, you're like at 3 times what the field is. So you're it depends how risk adverse or risk taking you want to be, I guess would be my stance. But as I said, I completely appreciate where you guys are coming from. I completely appreciate Byron's comment in the comments as well, that he has improved the putter towards the latter half of last year. I tend to fade the 7K chalk where I can, and it's one of the spots I can in the hope basically that the putter doesn't show up and look to get a bit different for me.
Well, there you have it, a controversial topic on Luke List this week. Let's see how it plays out, what the ownership ends on when the tournament starts. Spence, you got 2 here. You started with Finau. How are you following that up?
What a wild world that I'm actually defending Luke List in some way. I mean, I legitimately faded the guy for 6 months straight, got burnt in every single tournament that I did so, watched him win events where I had head-to-head matchups against him, and for some reason you throw him on a big boy course here at Torrey Pines and my numbers like him. But this is not the route that I was planning to go when everything started. I think the O'Barron Sung Jae pick really threw a monkey wrench into this for me. So there's going to be a lot of popularity with these next 2 names I'm going to talk about. I think I can get different elsewhere, and I feel comfortable in being able to do so. For the show, so it looks, I'm trying to strategically do this so I like the way that my lineup looks from the way I've drafted it. I'm going to go with Xander Schauffele and go all the way at the top of the board. I know the ownership is wild for him. I do think that when I compare him to Cantlay, Morikawa, and Homa, I could make an argument that Homa has a little bit better win equity than Xander does. Homa's obviously off the board, so that's not a decision that I can make right now. But I think Xander, when you look at him historically at Torrey Pines, he started very slowly in his career. This has been a tournament that's a hometown feel for him that it just never really came together. And if you look at what he's done the past handful of years, 2 top 13 finishes in the past 3, 34th place finish in 2022. The current form is magnificent. He's made 36 consecutive cuts. I think there's a safety built into the mix there. The price tag is a little bit higher for the ownership that I'm having to pay for him, but I like Xander this week. I think Xander's the good chalk of the group of everybody we're talking about. I think Homa would probably be, for me, the 1B of that answer, but I guess I'll fire off the second one and we can then just go through there. I'm going to go with Sahith Theegala, 8,700, 19% owned in my model. Much more ownership than I would have cared to have seen for him, but he had a couple factors in my sheet that really propelled him, that kind of mimicked a little bit of what we saw at the Fortinet. So during the fall season, I noted that he had a boost for weighted proximity that gave him an 87 spot improvement. We don't necessarily have quite as large of an amount here, but 56 spot disparity in my model in weighted proximity. He also has massive increase for me when you look at his projected strokes, weighted tee to green return. A lot of that comes from his ability to be able to kind of fly the ball all around off the tee. You're able to miss fairways there. You're able to play, I called it big boy golf with Luke List. I think Sahith Theegala has the ability to play that golf. He has the short game to clean everything up with it. So he's very popular. There are a couple popular names there in the $8,000 section, but it's kind of the same answer I talked about Xander. I do think Sahith is good chalk here.
There you have it. I mean, I love Sahith. I think he's definitely on the rise. I mean, we've been saying that for a few years, but he's playing really well. I think you made 2 really solid picks here. My question for you is, you're going to have to get unique to finish this team out. I think you spent a lot of your salary. I think it's a really strong side. I'm intrigued to see how you round it out. David, are you on Xander or Sahith this week?
Yeah, I think they're both really solid plays. Xander's obviously got the local factor being from San Diego. So this is basically his hometown event. So he's well motivated to play well here. In amongst those events as well, Spence, I'd add that he finished 7th at the US Open here.
Yes.
So he's got that as well in terms of his last 4 starts. So he's played very well in the course historically, and I agree. I think he's a nice, safe option, particularly like him in cash as like a starting point for your builds. And then Thigala, again, I love the course fit for him. Massive driver of the golf ball. That's going to be really important this week. He's a great putter as well. I'd also add that he's had 2 starts here, finished 25th and 4th, and they're both before Thigala kind of became the Thigala that he is now. Like, he has improved since then as well, and he's had 2 really great finishes. So I think they're both really solid picks.
There you have it. We are moving and grooving. All right, I'll be honest with you. I'm steering this draft, and I am not fully settled on my pick. So if one of you want to give me like 10 seconds to make this pick and buy me some time, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about Thigala a little bit more, and we can talk about this in the $8,000 section in general. And David, like, I don't want to talk about too many players that haven't been selected yet, but like, if we compare him with Keegan Bradley, is there a route for you where you want to play both? You want to play one? You're trying to fade one because of the ownership?
Yeah, so I think in like a GPP lineup, right? Like, Thigala's real boom or bust. I feel like he's the kind of golfer who's going to finish like top 10 or he's going to miss the cut for you. And there's kind of no in between. Whereas combining that with someone like Bradley, who we expect is going to make the cut, and, you know, he might finish top 25 and winning might be a bit more difficult for him. I kind of like that combination. I would say that I tipped Keegan Bradley here last year at 66-1, I believe, and he finished 2nd. So just missed out on that win, got pipped by Homer at the post. His odds have been cut into about half of that, and I think a lot of that's back off the win at the Travelers last year.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate the time. I'm ready to go. So, David, this one's for you. I hope you're impressed. I mean, it's a DP World Tour guy. I'm taking him early.
Before you say this, I'm about to take a DP World Tour guy with my next pick, so it better not be him.
It's one of the more obvious ones. So if that's who it is, it's the guy everyone knows. It's Meronk. I'm going to go with Meronk. Is that who you were going to take? Probably not.
No, it wasn't,
okay.
Which is good.
We're in good shape. I think he's a good course fit. He's playing well. He hits the ball far. I need to save some salary at 8,200. I think the price is right where I can afford him. And, you know, for me, I really start to struggle in this tournament getting below that like 8K range of guys that I really feel good about. So if I can build a lineup that's a little bit more balanced where I don't have to dive too deep down there and punt any plays, I will. And I think Meronk allows you to do that with some upside as well. So we'll start with you, David. Will Meronk be in your player pool at all this week?
He will be. I'll probably be underweight on him, and here's why. I think it's a really good course fit for him. Like, I totally agree with the course fit. He's a really strong driver of the golf ball. He's just he's just had a great week at the Dubai Desert Classic. Emirates Golf Course is a really strong driver's golf course. Rory McIlroy's got an awesome record there. He's won it 4 times. He won again this week. Meronk was runner-up to him, and he was in contention the whole week. Here's my only concern. It's because he finished 2nd last week in Dubai, and we've got a Wednesday start over in the USA. There's a lot of travel involved. He's probably had less practice rounds than other guys, and he's been in contention all week. It was a big week for him over in Dubai at a really big DP World Tour tournament. That's my only concern. I think it's an awesome course fit for him. I think he could go really well here. My concern is just the fact that he was in such hot contention all last week at a really big tournament, and then he's had to travel, 18 odd hours to get to San Diego this week. So there's travel, jet lag, lack of practice time. So those are some of my concerns that I'd just flag.
Yeah, it's a quick turn. It's a good point. And it made me think when you were saying that, how do these guys, how do they choose which PGA Tour tournaments they come and play? Obviously, they have to get invited. But, to your point, it almost kind of sounds like it would have made sense for him not to play this tournament. I guess you kind of, for some of these guys, it might be when there's opportunities, you just take them and you go play. But it's interesting. Like, how does that breakdown happen? How is this the tournament they ended up kind of falling into?
So I would say for Moronk, right, he earned his way in the top 10 stakes on the DP World Tour, so he hasn't got the entries into the designated events. I would say it's a combination of when the bigger tournaments are on the DP World Tour, he's probably going to be playing those, and then jumping across to the PGA Tour and some of the weaker events, and then obviously you can't play in the designated events as well. So I think it's a combination of that. There's been a couple of big high-priced tournaments over in the DP World Tour to start the season, so he started his season over there, which makes sense. He's obviously got a very good record in Dubai as well, so he's a resident there as well. So there was those factors to consider, I guess, and part of it will also come down. They'll target certain courses that are going to fit their game, and I agree this is kind of one of them where it does. I kind of wish it was like 1 week later, and then I'd be almost all in on Morocco. So
yeah, that makes sense. Spence, are you playing Morocco at all this week?
Probably.
Yeah.
I think he's an interesting contrarian play for all the reasons that David just mentioned there. People are not going to want to play him, and that's a legitimate concern. I don't want to discredit that. Like, making that trip could be a problem here, but I have seen him, depending, and I'm going to update ownership one more time tonight, but I've seen him anywhere between 6% to about 8%. I think he is potentially one of those slate breaking GPP sort of options if he puts the pieces together. DP World Tour player that already isn't the most popular inside of the United States. He doesn't necessarily have the finishes in this country that you would hope to see historically, at least over the past year or so. So I think he's intriguing, though. I'm curious to see what his ownership ends up at.
I like it. And I'm also, the reason that I was bringing up that questioning is I am starting to think, I think we're going to see more of these DPT World Cup guys because so many guys left for live, and there's more spots in these tournaments that need to get filled, and there's just going to be more opportunities. So I think this is becoming more of a trend of the norm than it is like a random tournament they're showing up in, just because the PGA Tour needs to fill these spots and needs names and getting good players there. So there'll be more invitations out there. So to be determined, we'll see. David, your third pick here. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, and I was actually going to take a DP World Tour guy, but I think actually looking at the salary that the audience has, I'm going to have to take this player just in case they steal him from me. So I'm going to go with Will Zalatoris. He's looked really good. Like his recovery seems to be going really well. He gained in all categories last week at the American Express, finishing 34th. He's got a good record. He's finished second in 2022. He had a 7th in 2021 as well. And look, I think that he's a lot healthier than people are giving him credit for. I thought the performance last week, he looked really good. So I'm happy to take him here at a course. He's got a really good record and feels like if there was like zero injury concerns, he would be priced a lot higher than he currently is in DFS markets.
There you have it. I love it. At 8K, there's upside with Willie Z. He's not going to be able to make putts, but other than that, he's going to be great. So if he finds a way to, and sometimes my theory is, and I can convince myself of anything, but sometimes my theory is the harder it is to putt, sometimes that benefits the bad putters, because if nobody's making putts, then, it kind of neutralizes the fact that you can't make putts anyway. So that could help him here because the putting difficulty could neutralize his weakness, and if he strikes the ball well, like he will, he could have a lot of upside.
Can I talk to the putting thing just quickly?
Sure.
I agree. Like he definitely is a dreadful putter sometimes, and I get that. Here he's played here 5 times. He's gained in a big way putting on 2 occasions. 2 of the times he was at field average, and 1 he lost a lot. So the fact he's had some really big spike weeks here in terms of his putting, he's had 2 where he was just like putting at the average of the field. So 4 out of 5 instances, like if he produces putting at that rate, I'm quite happy to take him here, just given his ball striking is so good.
That's also what my model shows too. He's 141st in my model in strokes gained putting. When I ran it for just strokes gained putting on fast POA surfaces, he climbed the 60th. And it kind of goes to your point, Joel. Like a guy like Hideki Matsuyama is able to win the Masters because you put him on a fast surface where all of a sudden it's one of his strengths is avoiding 3 putts. And I think Zalatoris has a very similar profile there where the ball striking is so elite. You don't need to make as many putts to actually win the contest. And a lot of the putting is avoiding those 3 putts that come into play. And Zalatoris has always been a pretty decent lag putter, according to my numbers. So it's a very nice course setup for him. There's a reason why at his best, there was 2 top 7 finishes. And if there's any belief that he has rounding back into form with his health, he's a $9,700 golfer with a clean bill of health here.
And to your point, exactly right. If Zalatoris gives you a top 5 finish this week, top 10 even, he's not sniffing an 8 in the front of his price again, probably for the foreseeable future. So get the 8K flat is a super great price. Might be the best you see for him in a long time if he gets you a good finish. So I like that pick as well. Audience, it looks like at least one of the picks is in for sure, and it is Decky. No complaints from me. You know I love me some Decky. It looks like Team Audience also likes their players to have at least one initial starting with M. Funny coincidence. I like the team. It's a good pick. Spence, what say you on Decky this week?
I'm so conflicted with Hideki this week. I honestly don't know what to do with him. This has been the answer that I've given on the show where my model likes him and I keep trying to find a reason to fit him into builds. I guess my biggest concern is the price tag and the ownership. Like the ownership is starting to increase. He seems to be a very popular name. The price tag is not cheap at $8,500. Don't know if he necessarily has the win equity that I'm looking for. I don't know what to do. I haven't made a decision on him yet. Like I'm sitting here at 7:00 Pacific time and I haven't removed him yet. And I'm probably leaning in that direction of removing him, but I certainly understand why the audience likes him. Like he's been a great fit at this course in the past. It's just, I haven't seen enough from him recently to believe that even if he gets himself into contention, that he's going to be able to maintain it.
Fair enough. I mean, that is a strong stance against Decky. But I mean, I totally understand it. David, what say you on Decky this week?
I just love that the PGA Draft Cast has gone back to guys who are like definitely going to withdraw. We started with Zalatoris and now Matsuyama back to back. They're both definitely not going to finish the tournament, so that's great. I do really like Hideki this week. Again, I think a lot of people always end up on out of these guys because they've got injury concerns, and totally get that. But that's also where you can get a bit different and grab some ownership leverage. He ranks out really well on comp courses for me. So, I mean, in terms of courses I'm looking at this week, this is one of them, along with Quail Hollow, Congaree, Wingfoot, like all those long Whistling Straits, those really long driving golf courses. He's 5th in this field on previous performance on those golf courses. So he's got a great record, and I think it's a good fit.
There you have it. The 4th pick for the audience is Michael Kim. They got the pick in. Interesting pick here with Kim, and the audience does need to start saving some salary. I like the Kim pick, especially knowing where you guys are salary-wise, trying to get a value play. I can get behind that. We'll go to you, Spencer. Are you playing Michael Kim at all this week?
Probably so. He is going to be very popular. He has local ties to the area, going to high school there. Some of the numbers inside of my model for him are just really skyrocketing him, though, in certain portions. Like, he feels too cheap, which is an understatement when a golfer is over 10% owned. Like the rest of the community feels like that also, but I found him to be intriguing. Like I was, full disclosure, probably going to take him when it came back to me, which is maybe a little bit too much popularity to my build. So I'll try to get different there, but I like the Michael Kim pick. I think that there's some safety built into there and maybe a little bit more upside than meets the eye.
There you have it. Pick endorsed. Audience off to a great start. David, your take on Michael Kim and your 4th pick.
So Michael Kim's another name that I'm going to be out on this week. I'm getting like a 10.5% ownership, which I think is way too high for him. I concerns, I guess, are one, the ownership at that price range, the fact that his driving distance isn't the longest either. So, that's going to be an issue, I think, on a really long golf course like this. And he's had 7 tries and his best finish is 25th. And there's a bunch of kind of like middling 40 to 50th place kind of finishes and a few missed cuts. So if there's going to be massive ownership on a guy that's had plenty of chances at this golf course and never really like had a standout performance, I'm probably going to be out on that. So that's my take on Michael Kim. I'll go in and grabbing a guy at 7,100. I'm going to take Austin Eckroat, really strong driver of the golf ball, great total driving golf stats, really good putter. He was very, very strong last week, finishing 25th at the American Express. He had the chance to finish a lot higher than that as well. He's had 2 appearances here. I think he's a different golf player than when he turned up here. 10th at the US Open at LACC. I think that's one thing that you can look at with him. And, he was like new on the scene when he he put up that 10th in a major, and obviously that was in California. Kind of a comparable golf course. If you're going to need to really drive the golf ball pretty long, and a lot of guys are going to be missing fairways here, and he's a fairly accurate driver for the distance that he has.
There you have it. Austin Eckroat. Spence, what say you on Eckroat this week?
Yeah, I think he's the slightly less popular version of, maybe not skill-wise, I'm not making that comparison, but of the Michael Kim discussion. Like, I think Eckroat is probably also good chalk. There's positive trajectory in my model for upside. The current form looks fantastic. If we believe that he's turned the corner, there's a lot of golfers in this field. He would be one of them that doesn't have the course history. But if we believe that they're different golfers coming into the event this year, that's a very intriguing position that Eckroat is too cheap. I guess the only concern is that it comes down to for me is that he has not been great here. And I understand he's better, but that's like the only thing that is giving me some form of trepidation, but he's in my player pool right now.
All right. All right. There you have it. This draft is getting away from what I was planning to do. I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to finish out this lineup, but I can't believe this guy is still left, and I can't let him stay off the board, so I'll figure out the rest later. I'm going to take Collin Morikawa. I think some people might look at, he's not the longest and not want to play the course fit. He has success. He's had success here. He's performed well. He's playing good golf. I think this is a spot where Collin Moore can come out and win the tournament, not even being the highest price guy on the board. I'm happy with the value. I mean, he's still 10K. And he's obviously you're still paying up for him, but I'm happy to pay that price for a guy with as much upside as Collin here. So love Collin. I love that I was able to get him this late. I am going to have to scramble later to make this lineup work, but we'll go to you, David. Are you playing Morikawa at all?
Yeah, I think Morikawa's a decent fit. I mean, obviously he's got a great record here. He's played it 3 times, finished 21st, 4th, and 3rd. So you can't really fault the course form. The 4th was at a US Open as well, so slightly different setup, but probably just a little bit tougher than the way they'll have it ticking this week. I think he had a really strong end to 2023. He hasn't finished worse than 25th since July, so he's been playing well, and a lot of that's come from the improvements in the short game, in his chipping and in his putting as well. So that's always been a concern for Morikawa, obviously, and if we can see him turn a corner on those numbers, then he's going to be contending in tournaments in no time.
There you have it, Spence. Morikawa, are you playing him this week or not?
I think he's a great cash game play for me because I'm playing Xander and I'm leaning towards playing Homa. Probably going to be out on Morikawa and can't lay in GPPs, but there's probably not a golfer in the $10,000 plus section that if you were to tell me you need one name that's going to make the cut this weekend, I probably trust him the most, which is why I go to that cash game answer.
There you have it. I love it. I love it. Spence, you got 7,100 average left. Who are you looking at here?
So I'm going to start with Taylor Pendrith at 7,400. 4 top 15 finishes for Pendrith in the last 6 starts. The weighted proximity increased over his baseline projection for me. Burned everybody last week, and I think this is a nice bounce back spot for him. The weighted strokes gained tee to green return did the same. He provided the 5th most significant shift inside of my model when looking at strokes gained tee to green. So I like Pendrith at 7,400, and then I need to save some money somewhere here, and I'm going to do it with a golfer that has really had a rough 2023, was plagued by injuries. He's come back so far this year. He's missed both cuts at the Sony, at the American Express. He missed the Sony cut by 2. He missed the American Express cut on the number. At his best, this was a golfer who had generated 6 top 40 finishes at Torrey Pines in 9 attempts. When you look from 2015 to 2023, I'm going to hope that the long-term profile and the ball striking shows up again for him at a venue that he's historically loved. So I'm going to take Jonathan Vegas at 6,700.
I love it. I was looking at Vegas. He was definitely someone I was thinking about. He will be in my player pool. I ended up coming off him for the DraftCast. Definitely a risky play, definitely someone I would stick to for tournaments. But I think you made all your point. I do think there's tournament upside at a great price. Someone I like taking a chance on this week. What about you, David? Will you be playing Pendrith or Vegas?
I mean, you asked earlier in the show, Joel, where Spence was going to get different, and I think he's done just that with both of those plays. Taylor Penrith, a lot of people are going to be out on because his metrics last week look really bad on paper. Bear in mind that the only course that they use the American Express that records strokes gained is the Pete Dye course, so you're only getting 2 out of 4 rounds for the data there, and it's not the best fit for him for the Stadium course. He's much better on the Nicholas course and La Quinta, so I think that's really interesting in terms of that aspect. And same with Jay Vegas, right? Like there's a lot of injury concerns there. A lot of people are going to be out on him. His ownership's going to be lower. What I do love with both of them is that you are going to see a larger number of approach shots from 150 to 200 and particularly 200 plus yards. That's really the strength of both Penrith and Vegas. They prefer those longer approach shots. That's really where they get their approach dialed in. They're not so good at the wedge play, which you see a lot of at the American Express. So I think they're 2 great different plays where this course is a better fit for them.
All right, there you have it. I'm between 2 guys. I'm going to take the guy I've mentioned on this show earlier in the year. He's a new guy. He's not a PGA Tour player. Another off-tour sneaky pick by me. I'm going to butcher his name, which is why I'm delaying it so much because I'm not sure how to say it. Rio, is it Hisetune?
Hisetune.
Now, listen, the guy's been playing great. And this is the guy we mentioned a couple weeks ago where I said the guy's playing well. He's new to the tour. Not a lot of people are going to know who he is. You're still going to get low ownership at only 7,500. But if you look at his recent form, he was T11 at the American Express. He got a T30 at Sony Open, top 6 at the Zozo. He's giving you results. He should be able to get you the bogey avoidance that you're looking for. I mean, not the perfect course fit, but I just think this guy's a better golfer than the price tag that he's been given. With pretty low ownership, I think there's enough upside for him to make a difference. So I'm going to stick with that pick there. David, will you be playing Rio at all?
I think it's interesting, right? Because I spoke about him at I think it was the Sony Open, and I think he's the one name that you could perhaps compare to Tom Kim as the next sort of Asian tour player who's going to come out and really set the world alight. He's only 20 years old and he's a huge talent. We can already see that. My concern comes from the driving distance. He's more of a driver accuracy type golfer than a driving distance type golfer. In saying that, the Zozo, that is a really long golf course over in Japan. I think that there was some local factors in there. The fact that it's a golf course he's played before, and there's a lot of past course history for him on a course like that, where he wants to perform in front of his local fans, and I get that as well. So I would point out that, yeah, his driving distance perhaps a little bit of concern, but he's shown up at courses like Zozo and finished 6th there, which was a really long driving golf course. So definitely a place that you're going to be a bit different to others in the market this week.
I love it. What say you, Spence, on Rio?
I agree with you, Joel. I think he's just too cheap. Like, it's reached a point where I think everybody tries to get creative. Eric Cole is the prime example of that every single week, to where everybody's trying to find a reason to not play some of these names. And the market, until Rio or Cole or some of these players show me something different, I'm going to probably just keep playing them at Rio. Here is, I see 5% ownership. He's going to be a contrarian play, which is what makes him even more interesting at a cheap price.
Exactly. I think had he been over 10, it wouldn't be someone I would be all that into. But if he's going to stay below the ownership number that I'm looking for, and he keeps playing well, definitely someone worth taking a shot on for me. All right, David, your 5th pick here. You got plenty of money to spend. Where are you going here?
Yeah, so I'm going to take that DP World Tour golfer that I spoke about earlier. And for me, it's going to be a bit of a different play. I think this is the one DP World Tour play that's perhaps going to fly under the radar a little bit, and that's Matthew Pavon, where you can get at a very, very cheap salary. He's made a really strong start to his PGA Tour career. Perhaps surprised a few people, including myself, with how quickly he stepped up to that level. He'd finished 7th at the Sony Open. I didn't think that was the best course fit for him, and he really played quite nicely. And then 39th at the American Express last week as well. What really pops for me with Pavon is some of the golf courses that he's played really well on the DP World Tour are the golf courses where it's really, really driver heavy. So just to put a few out there for people, that these are tournaments that a lot of people aren't going to have dived into, and it's going to make you a little bit different. So the Portugal Masters, he finished second. Russell Keimer Championship, he finished third. The Spanish Open, he finished second. Russell Keimer, he finished ninth. Then he won the Spanish Open last year in October, and then he followed that up with ninth at a new course at the Andalusia Masters, which is a really strong driving golf course. With those Spanish Open finishes as well, where he finished second and then won the tournament, that's a golf course that Jon Rahm has just dominated, and we all know what Jon Rahm has done previously around Torrey Pines on this golf course here. So he really shows up in a massive way with all those top 10 finishes on golf courses where drivers really heavy, which is what we're going to have this week. Nobody's going to be on him. He's like 3.5% owned, and he's played really well in his 2 starts on the PGA Tour.
There you have it. He's come up a few times already. Not the first time he's been drafted. Was he drafted? He was definitely mentioned last week. I'm not sure if he was drafted, but he's now becoming a trend on this show. So he played well. Pick definitely makes sense to me. Spence, what say you on Pavan?
Yeah, I took him last week, and I was going to round out my build this week and take him again. So I have very limited data on him. I'm not pulling in as much DP World Tour stats. I have a little bit in the mix that I added, but I do want to point out that of golfers $7,000 and up, he was technically the most underpriced player that I had in my sheet this week. I think that when you add the combination that nobody's going to play him with a very low price tag, there's a lot of intrigue around him. So I like the pick from David a lot.
I love it. I love it. Audience, you are on the clock. We need to. You have your fearless leader, Sia audience, in the chat to round out your squad. I'll be honest with you. I love the audience's squad so far. I think the audience has a chance to have a victorious week, all contingent on these last 2 picks and how you round out this roster. My concern is I'm not sure you even have a nomination in yet, which is very concerning considering you've been on the clock for like 25 seconds. So we need some picks in to make sure that you do round this team out well, because it's a good-looking roster. While we wait for the audience to get those final 2 plays in, we will pass this over to, I'll ask you, Spence, looking at the teams thus far and looking at the order of which guys were drafted, which pick thus far do you find to be the most surprising?
I mean, me taking Tony Finau number 1 is probably the most surprising, because I don't think he would have gone in the first round had I not done that. I mean, to be honest, I don't think anybody's made an egregious pick so far.
Okay, that's fair. I would agree. I don't think any pick was on here was like, whoa, what are you doing? And I'm not really surprised. I don't think anyone went too early. So I guess I'm with you. I don't think there's an overly shocking pick. So fair enough. I guess then it was, I'll take the bad question on that one. But the picks are in. We have 2. The first one's Lowry. That was by a landslide. Lowry was one guy I was looking at. He's really cheap, and he's certainly, we know Shane Lowry is upside. I haven't seen the best of Lowry all that recently, but at his price tag, we certainly know what he can do. So he's definitely someone I would consider, especially in the spot the audience was in with their budget left. How about you, David? Are you playing Shane Lowry all this week?
I just think that Lowry's just not looked like himself at the moment. I'm not sure what it is. You are going to get an ownership discount as off the back of that, and you're getting a bit of a price discount as well. I just much rather would spend the extra $100 and go someone like Zalatoris and taking that kind of route. It wasn't impressive for me at the American Express, and he's kind of just been middling for the last 6 months. And I love Shane Lowry. I think that he's got massive upside when he shows up at the right course. I wonder where his game's at the moment. And so I'm probably out on him this week. Bramblett was really close for the audience there for a little bit there as well. And I'd just say that I really liked him last week. I thought he looked really good, but coming into the week, he looked great. I thought he was a solid low option, and it just appears that he hasn't really recovered from the injury. I mean, he was out from July through to January with an injury that was undisclosed. We don't know quite what the reason was, and Then, yeah, at the Sony Open, he was 52nd and he missed the cut pretty badly at the American Express as well. So until I see a little bit from Brownlet in terms of recovery from the injury, I'm probably going to be out on him as well. And the audience, as I've talked about, Bramlett has decided
I was going to say, I think the pick is Bramlett. As you say that, the pick is in and it is Bramlett. So the audience going right after David. Whoever he does not like, they are taking. Interesting way to round up the squad. Listen, I think those last two picks are guys that are volatile with upside. So if they hit, I think it could be a great week. If they miss, it might crumble your lineup. But you're going for the big prize, and I think you can do so with them. Spence, what say you on Lowry and Bramlett?
I am not a Lowry guy. He was my biggest fade last week at the American Express. I do believe this is a better course fit for him. He's much more likely in my model to make the cut. I just don't love the upside that he possesses. I agree with David. I'd rather pay up for Zalatoris and shoot for the moon with him there. So I'm not going to play Lowry. Bramlett is intriguing because, yes, I wish he had better form. I wish we could have seen something from him at some point that would show that he's over any of the injury concerns that there is. But I talked about this with Byron yesterday on our Rotoballer show that we did. Top 20 plus 750. That's a place that pays ties in full. I think that's a very intriguing route to consider him. And then he also has 2 top 20 finishes at this tournament during the past 3 years. Driving distance, long iron proximity. Those are 2 areas of the game that he always thrives. Long courses have always given him the best upside that he possesses. So 4 for 4 and made cuts here. If I didn't take Jonathan Vegas, it was going to be Joseph Bramlett when I was trying to make that decision. I think it's very boom or bust. I do want to preface it with that, but I do think Bramlett has some upside here.
There you have it. Pick endorsed. David, your final pick here. Plenty of money to spend. Take who you want. Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, and look, breaking news for the PGA Draftcast. Sounds like Mr. CBS himself, Cian Najad, will be joining us next week. So I'm going to hold him to that and lock him in for next week. So that's exciting news to have him back on the show for another draft, which would be awesome. Yeah, plenty of salary to spend. I love that the audience took Joseph Bramlett as I just rubbished him as a play. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I mean, pretty obvious where I'm going to go here. I'm going to take Patrick Cantlay. What I want to point out is something really interesting for me that shows up in his data is he lost on approach at the Pete Dye course on Sunday in a big way. Like he had a really dreadful final round. He shot 4 over. Sometimes that just happens with a golfer, right? But where Patrick Cantlay has lost on approach the week prior, he's tended to show up the next week in a really big way. So in 2023, he lost strokes on approach at the Phoenix Open. Then next week at the Genesis, he finished 3rd. He lost strokes in a big way at Quail Hollow. The next week at the PGA Championship, he finished 9th. He lost strokes at the US Open. The next week at the Travelers, he finished 4th. He lost strokes at the Open Championship. The next week at the St. Jude, he finished 2nd. So anytime that he loses on approach the week prior, he tends to show up the next week. Kind of, I don't know where it comes from, if he's just annoyed or he comes out and he has a really good finish. And kind of banking on that a little bit here, that he lost an approach in a big way in his final round, ended up dropping down to 52nd. It was a real anomaly, not something we're usually used to seeing from him. Good, well-rounded aspects to his game. And obviously links to California, having gone to UCLA as well. Really like that aspect. The final thing I'll point out is that he's lost putting here on his first 3 tournaments. Last year, he gained 4 strokes putting across the tournament and finished 15th. So there's some big improvements on the greens here last time as well. And if we see that again, I think he's a real contender for a top 10.
I think it's a good point. I think there really could be something to that. Some guys, how you react to a bad outing, to a bad week, guys handle it differently. And some guys maybe take it really seriously, put a different type of preparation in and come out firing the next week. So I think that trend is telling. I like that pick. And especially with Cantlay being a West Coast guy, I think you could see a really great result from him this week. So definitely endorsed by me. Spencer, you won Cantlay and all this week.
First off, not surprised with the projected ownership. I think Cantlay would be the biggest surprise from the group, just when you look at the projection out there that all 4 $10,000 plus golfers were selected on the show. That's not necessarily something that happens every week. We've had discussions where there's a lot of names that don't get selected. And I think with general roster construction, if you would have put odds on this, I think people are going to try to be a little bit steadier with their builds. I wouldn't have been shocked if one of them would have been left, and it would probably have been Cantlay based off that. I think for GPP contests, and I'm probably not going to play Cantlay this week, but I do want to say this. I think for GPP contests, I would rather bet on Cantlay's upside than play Morikawa's safety when there's going to be between 7 to 10% difference in ownership. Like, I'll close my eyes and hope for the best on Cantlay there if you're directly making me pick between those two.
I think that's a fair point. I think I would probably agree with that if you're talking about ownership and upside combination alone.
The ownership's a real aspect here as well for that selection, is that he's the lowest owned golfer other than Eric Cole, over $9,000. He's 17% and everyone else is kind of in the 20s. So for me, his ownership looks really low coming into this week as well. So I'm happy to get different there with my guy at the top.
Yeah, and to your point, that counts. Like, that's a way of getting different. If you're playing chalky guys elsewhere, you're playing the more unique, studs. That's another way of just making sure your overall ownership percentage isn't too chalky. All right, my last pick. I'll be honest with you. I'm not in love with this pick, but it's kind of the best I can do with the salary I've left myself. So I don't hate him. This is a guy I mentioned for first round leader all the time. This is a guy I play a lot. He missed 4 cuts in a row, which is what I don't love, but this should be a course fit. He's long. If there's a week where he could step up, and David, do you have a guess?
Is it Callum Tarrant?
It is. It is Callum Tarrant. Yes. I have an affinity for him. I play him all the time. If I got to pick someone under 6,600 here, I think Tarrant's a good fit. So if he does find a way to maybe get a hot putter, come out here and have a good result, I think he has some upside under 6,600. David, since you guessed the pick, will you be playing Tarrant all this week?
Yeah, I really like him in like a GPP aspect. I like the boom or bust nature that you're going to get from him. He can get eagles, he can get birdies. He's plenty long off the tee, and he can get either really hot with the putter or really poor with the putter. So I kind of like him as a differential GPP play. I'm not going to play him like 25% of my lineups, but if I had him in 5 to 10%, that's kind of all the exposure that you need to be different. And if he comes out and has one of those top 5 weeks, which we know he has the ability to do, it's a great spot. So really like the play.
And I'm also impressed that you were able to guess it before I even took it. So nicely done. Spence, what say you on Tarrant this week?
I'm probably generally out on anybody that's 6,500 or less in this tournament. Like, I don't want to find myself down in that range if I can avoid it. I do agree with both of you guys. There's a boom or bust potential to him, at least compared to the rest of the names. So if you're trying to shoot for the moon on somebody, he probably makes more sense than pretty much anybody else that we can talk about in that section. But I don't know. I still think there's too much volatility, and I don't have him at like 0% projected ownership. I see him at 2 to 3%, which is one of the heavier guys in ownership down in that range. I just probably am not going to get there personally.
So I think your points are all fair. The one thing my personal take on the ownership side is agreed. 2 or 3 is high for that range for sure. But at 2 or 3, it's still so low that, I'm okay with playing it because it's not going to be something that I'm competing with too many people on. So that won't be a major factor. Anything under like 4 or 5% is not going to be a major factor for me.
Well, to give like a very similar answer to that, just to kind of touch on it again, like Jonathan Vegas for me is about 4% owned. We're not really talking with that big of a difference in price tag there. I think for the right player, and I think Joseph Bramlett, maybe the same answer can be given for him. For the right player, I'm willing to eat the ownership down there because 3, 4, 5% isn't going to necessarily break you. But I think when it's like 2, 3% on a golfer that's outside of the top 100 in a lot of the safety portions of my model and doesn't necessarily pop as high as I would like to see, like at least Vegas has the massive ceiling for me when he does hit, and then the floor is as low as you possibly can imagine, but at least I'm shooting for that upside there. I just don't know if Tarrant hits it enough for me to feel comfortable, but I agree with the general sentiment that like of your choices that you've had in the range that you're at, probably one of the better routes that you can go. It's just, I don't want to find myself down there.
Makes sense. I generally agree. I'm trying to avoid that range as much as possible this week. Spence, you got 7,300 left, 1 pick to go. How are you finishing out the squad?
I think there's a couple interesting ways that I could try to round this out. Like Michael Kim would have been interesting for me. I think Taylor Moore makes some sense. My model likes him this week. I would have liked Pavon if he would have been on the board. I would have liked Eckroat if he would have been on the board. So I think the 2 names that I keep finding myself going back to would be Thomas Dietrich, which seems to be one of the slip-ups that I consistently find myself in on the PGA Draftcast, to where he's in this lower $7,000 range, and I feel the need to have to throw him into a lineup. I'm going to decide to go against that mentality because I just have never gotten quite the upside that I'm looking for on him. And I'm going to go with a golfer that has made, at this point, 8 consecutive cuts. He does have a made cut here, albeit not quite the finish that you would want to see in 2023. But one of the biggest significant climbers in my model when looking at my weighted tee to green production versus what you would expect from him on a generic course, that's Davis Thompson at 7,200, sub 5% ownership. I think he has a little bit of that boomer bust mentality, even though he has made 8 cuts. He has the distance that I'm looking for. Nobody's going to play him. It's a way for me to get unique. And I do think the ceiling's a little bit higher than most people do.
There you have it. The pick is in. That is a wrap for this draft. I think we have some really solid teams. For some reason this week, these teams look like super teams. Like, they all look like they're good. They all look like they could win. I think this was a great draft. Don't forget, give us a follow, hit the like button. Let us know what team you think is going to win. We're going to drop the lineups on Twitter, on X. Let us know whose team you like the most. We are coming back next week and crowning a winner. We want to see what side you're on. We're not done yet. We're a little bit over time. Before we wrap up tonight, we do have some first-round leader plays. Now, the first round is going to be played on 2 different courses, so there's 2 different courses you can pick from. We're not going to break down each course. We're just going to give a couple of picks each. If you want to make the bets, put them in, and then we'll get you guys out of here for tonight. Don't forget, before we wrap up, get your lineups in and your bets in tonight, first thing tomorrow morning. The tournament starts tomorrow, Wednesday, not Thursday. So don't forget that key piece of information. David, we'll start with you. Who are you looking at in the first round leader market?
Very quickly, before I give these out, Spence didn't see that I had my finger raised there, and after I correctly guessed that Joel was going to do Callum Tarrant, the reason I had my finger raised was because I knew that Spence was going to take Davis Thompson. So let the record show that I correctly predicted who both of you were going to take at the end of the draft. Read into that what you will. But I did like Davis Thompson there. For my first round leaders, I want to point something out for anyone who has access to Bet365. So anyone who's overseas in certain states in America, Bet365 have really screwed up this week because they've put a first round leader market that doesn't differentiate by which course you're on. The North course is a lot easier than the South course, and they're all just lumped in there together as first round leaders. So there's a massive opportunity over at Bet365 to have an edge. Typically, it will be the week that someone goes on the South course and shoots like a 60 just stupidly. But just to point out that there is an edge there, they've lumped everybody in, even though they're on different courses. So, of guys playing on the North course, for their first round over at Bet365, you can get Thigala at 35-1, you can get Bo Hosser at 50-1. Matthew Pavon at 66-1, Justin Suh at 70-1, Vincent Norman 80-1, and Cal Yuan at 80-1 as well. All long drivers of the golf pool, all great putters on their day. They can really boom or bust, which is what you want in the first round leader, and they all get the easier course. I just love the fact that they're all lumped into the same market. Bet365 have really screwed that up, and that's the sort of week that we want to take advantage of.
I love it, and that's an edge, right? That's where you should take advantage. If the book is going to give you an edge, you should take it. If you have Bet365, that sounds like something I would be very interested in. What say you, Spence, in your first round leaders?
I was going to give the same answer as David there. Bet365 is a very intriguing market. Bo Hostler 50-1, Ryan Fox 60-1 are the 2 names I'm going to back.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to give out 2 as well. I like Michael Kim, and I'm just going on the DraftKings odds. I do not have Bet365, but I like Michael Kim at 40-1, and I also like Hideki Matsuyama at 35-1. That's a wrap for tonight. Don't forget, hit the like button, give us a follow, log in tonight on Win Daily. If there's any other outright tickets, bets that we have, you can check them out there. Your subscribers will get all the extra information. Check out our ownership articles before you put your lineups in. Good luck this week. And of course, sports.